Welcome to the Tox is Calling Me video series and podcast, where we explore the various career options that exist in medical toxicology. I am your host, Dr. Emily Kiernan. This series is brought to you by the American College of Medical Toxicology and is a collaborative project between the recent graduate section and the Fellows-in-Training section. For this session, we will be discussing careers in industry with Dr. Eliza Dunn. Dr. Dunn is the medical affairs lead and a senior science fellow at Bayer. She's an emergency medicine physician and medical toxicologist with a longstanding interest in global health. She did her residency at Washington University School of Medicine and her toxicology fellowship at the New York Poison Control Center. She subsequently started the Tox Fellowship at Washington University, and we are thrilled to have her on our podcast today. Episodes of Tox is Calling Me can be viewed on the ACMT website or listened to on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We have one disclosure for all of our recordings. The statements and views in this podcast and recording belong to the speaker and do not reflect the views or beliefs of the American College of Medical Toxicology, the speaker's employer, or the U.S. government. Any discussion herein does not constitute medical advice. For any questions related to the podcast, please reach out to me on Twitter at M2Kiernan, Kiernan. Dr. Dunn, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
So I understand that you're a medical toxicologist and that you work in industry in Bayer, and that's not something that we typically think of. A lot of our toxicology fellows enter into a tox fellowship thinking they're going to go into academic medicine. So how did you get your start? How did you, decide to do a toxicology fellowship and then enter into industry?
Yeah, well, so I did emergency medicine, and I love emergency medicine. I think it's a great specialty, but I felt like I was a jack of all trades and a master of none. So I decided to pursue a toxicology fellowship to fill out some what I perceive to be gaps in my knowledge and develop some real expertise in the area of toxicology. And so I went to NYU between 2004 and 2006 and trained under Bob Hoffman and Lewis Nelson, which I really enjoyed. And then I came back to Washington University and it started our own medical toxicology training program, fellowship program. And I had done relief work prior to that. And the reason why I'd done emergency medicine was because I was interested in going into being able to do relief work and being able to not be tied to a clinic, but be able to have a skill set that could be useful in humanitarian kind of situations. So in 2010, when Haiti had its big earthquake, a couple of residents and I organized Washington University's relief mission to Haiti. And we spent a couple of months taking care of people in a village called Petit Guave. And like I said, I had done relief work, a little bit of relief work before, and I realized that, it seemed like we were putting a Band-Aid on a problem as opposed to doing anything sustainable. And while we were helping people who are acutely injured or acutely ill and not able to get medical services, and that was great, there wasn't anything really kind of sustainable. When you take your skill set with you, you leave, and you leave the population, this at-risk population, really not with a whole lot to show for all your efforts. And so I started thinking critically about what kinds of problems was I seeing over and over again, and how do you address those problems? And what I realized was I was seeing a lot of malnutrition and a lot of insect-borne illness. And so I started thinking about things like how can you address malnutrition? I started reading a little bit about GMOs, and people, get worried that GMOs might cause problems, but GMOs actually are very well studied, and they have the potential to really provide a lot of food security and micronutrients to otherwise people who otherwise don't have access to those things. So if you think about it, 3 grasses feed over 60% of the world's population, and those 3 grasses are corn, wheat, and rice. And while they're great because they fill you up, they often are lacking in micronutrients. And so I started reading about golden rice. And golden rice is genetically modified to make the precursor of vitamin A. and was developed in order to prevent vitamin A associated blindness in children, the deficiency associated blindness in children, which kills about 350,000 kids per year around the world. So it's a big, big problem. And it was developed by a couple scientists and licensed by Syngenta, which is another company, an industry company. And it has been available, but has not been on the market because of the fears that have been around GMO technology. And it's unfortunate because the people who have been speaking about all of the concerns that they have about industry, they themselves don't have children going blind. So we've started to make more inroads for getting golden rice. It's finally being used in the Philippines now. It's been approved in the Philippines. So that's a positive step, but it's taken over 20 years because of concerns around it. So I started reading about GMOs and realized how really innovative that technology is and how it could really mitigate malnutrition and help with food security. The other thing that I realized is that I was seeing a lot of insect-borne illness, and the mosquito kills more people per year than any other creature, close to 1 million people per year, and that's more than people kill each other. So vector control becomes a really, really important issue when you're, especially in developing countries, because they've got all sorts of tropical diseases that we don't see here so much in the Northern Hemisphere. And so I really started realizing that pesticides were pretty critical for public health, and we've kind of forgotten that a little bit. And so in December of 2015, I got an email from a colleague of mine, Dan Goldstein, who's a medical toxicologist and kind of shepherded me through my career in academia. And he was working for Monsanto. And he asked our toxicology group if we knew of anybody who would be interested in filling his job. And I hemmed and I thought, I don't know if I want to work for Monsanto. And, you know, there's perceptions about this company and things like that. And then I thought, I'll just give it a go and see what I think. And I actually asked if I could continue to work at WashU, and right now I'm still adjunct at WashU, but I could still continue working in the ER at WashU. And I worked, so I started working at Monsanto in 2016. I worked 2 shifts in the ER, and I said, no, I really like this job. And I continued to do toxicology clinically until 2018. And then our program shifted to EPIC, or electronic records, and I didn't want to do 18 hours of unreimbursed computer training. So I just said, fine, I'm going to stay with this other job. So, but
what was that job that you were looking to take over?
Yeah, so he was the medical affairs lead for the regulatory science team. Regulatory science and was regulatory science, RPSA, a regulatory policy and scientific affairs team. And now we are just a regulatory scientific affairs team. And so what the job entailed, there are 2 kind of big chunks to the job. You do regulatory work. So if you've got a pesticide that's on the market, and it's a global pesticide, it needs to be re-registered every couple of years in different countries. So your job then is to evaluate all of the medical literature about the pesticide and write a synopsis of what it entails, and then get involved with submissions of regulatory dossiers to different governments and things like that. So that's one kind of component. But the other big component is really I do a lot of educational outreach, and really enjoy that. So I've been able to talk to academics, societies, government officials, the press. So it's like teaching toxicology on steroids, because you are touching so many different kinds of people, and you're explaining kind of complex tox issues to everybody from farmers to, PhD scientists. One of the things that I really loved about emergency medicine and working at WashU is I had access to these brilliant minds, right? And you get to, and there's a variety of specialties that people had. So great radiologists, great surgeons, great other ER doctors. But so I always felt like I was learning something. This is a whole nother level of that, right? So Bayer acquired Monsanto, and the acquisition was complete in 2018.
Mhm.
So I now work for the world's largest life science company. And the motto of the company is health for all and hunger for none. And the crop science division actually turns out to be the biggest division in the company. And it's got global reach. I get to speak to scientists from all over the world every day. So I've got colleagues in Brazil. I've got colleagues in Argentina, all over Southeast Asia, Australia, Africa. So and they're specialists in a gajillion different, specialties. Their expertise is just mind-boggling. Um, so it's opened my worldview tremendously, and it's been a fantastic job. And so I love academia. I think academia is intellectually challenging and things like that, and it's fun to work with colleagues in academia. But this is orders of magnitude more challenging, and I learn something new every day. It's just a really fantastic job.
Wow, that makes me want to come work with you.
Yeah.
It's great because I think one of the reasons a lot of us go into talks is we do like education and we do like teaching medical students and residents. And then once you get into fellowship, you have these people in our toxicology clinic, and you have to again take these very complex toxicology concepts and be able to explain it to an array of different learners and different education levels. And it's nice to see that you are able to take that to a whole other level. And I'm sure that your colleagues see you the same way as this brilliant person who understands all of this weird medical toxicology, golden rice, a vitamin A deficiency, and that all just fits in so well with what we do for the 2-year training and in this Tox Fellowship. Yeah, and I think it's also a great point that all of those regulations, all those pesticide regulatory things that you don't think you really need to learn for boards, see, they're important and they're applicable in the real world.
Yeah, they really are. And it's great. It's great to have developed that background, because that wasn't. I've learned so much about regulatory toxicology, and I realize, and I think a lot of companies are starting to realize, that there's a real need for physicians to lend their expertise to companies on topics like this. Because if you think about it, most medical toxicologists have training in addiction, they've got training in overdose, they've got training in adverse drug reactions, and then they get the basic pesticide stuff, but they don't know how chemistries are really regulated. And so this has been eye-opening for me. And we started a course. I don't know if you've heard about this course, but we started it with ACMT to try to give people information on how chemistries, be they pharmaceuticals, consumer health, natural herbal kind of stuff, or pesticides, crop protection products, are regulated from the bench to the field or the bench to the bedside. So when you start with R&D and innovation and things like that, how do you actually, what does it take to get a product from one spot to the other? I think that a lot of physicians, I've heard actually a lot of physicians say that chemistries aren't regulated, that there are thousands of chemicals on the market that don't have any regulatory oversight, and that's mistaken. They really are very, very, very rigorous parameters put around chemistries that are going to go on the market.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. And I'm assuming that you're talking about the ACMT Medical Toxicology and
Yes.
Industry, which is another wonderful webinar series put on ACMT and Bayer. I know you can find them on YouTube if you're not an ACMT member, but I would highly recommend listening to them. I think there's another one coming up tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Yeah.
Yes.
Tomorrow. Yeah. Please join. Yeah.
So everyone should definitely check that out if you're more interested, more in.
Yes, because it's going to be the 4 fellows who rotated. This was our pilot group. So they are the 4 fellows that rotated through. So they're going to talk about what their experiences were and what they learned. So yeah, I'd love to have other people come
Yeah,
on.
looking forward to that. That's great. Um, so I mean, did you really have any, it doesn't sound like you had, other than kind of the work that you were doing with kind of all of your global health work, you didn't really have much in the way of exposure to industry or working in industry prior to your toxicology fellowship.
No, in fact, a lot of academics understandably like to keep industry at arm's length, and they want to make sure they're not getting biased, and they want to make sure that they're, doing the right thing, right? So, but what's really, I think, interesting is I've watched medicine evolve over the past 20 some odd years now. We've gone from having a year of pharmacology when I was in training to 6 weeks of pharmacology. And people learn sort of basic pharmacology. And then the notion in medical school and in the curriculum building is that as people graduate and they get into their specialties, the attendings who are on those specialties will teach them about the drugs that they need to use.
Yeah.
That's fine, except for if that group of attendings don't know how those drugs work. They gave those drugs because their attendings gave those drugs, and they don't know the nuances of it. I think that you lose something there. So I think that as pharmacology has gone by the wayside, and as drug reps have not been able to come talk to doctors to talk about how their medications work, I think doctors have lost an opportunity, and pharmaceutical companies have then gone and done direct advertising to patients. And so patients then come to you with questions about certain drugs. And I think that there needs to be, this is where toxicology is really important. I think that toxicology is a key for emergency medicine physicians, because it really fills out their pharmaceutical knowledge, right? And it really fills out their how to deal with adverse drug reactions and things like that. But I also think that there are really brilliant scientists who know this stuff fundamentally in industry, and that it's a shame that dialogue's been lost, because I think that academics could really learn something, and if there were a way to make sure that bias is not there, or that it's completely transparent, that there's a company involved with this kind of thing. I think it really it provides an opportunity to learn about how things work and really get a robust background in that. And that's what I'm hoping some of this program can fill out, because the scientists in industry are geniuses. They're just so smart. One of our scientists has, if you think about pesticides, right? So 99% of the pesticides that you consume, residues wise, come from plants, and they're natural because plants can't run away from you. So they make their own chemistries to defend themselves and their babies. And you know this because you know that there are cyanogenic compounds in seeds. And why is that? Well, because the plant wants to protect its offspring, right? So you get you get exposed to those kinds of residues all the time. And the vast majority of people get exposed to those kinds of residues in orders of magnitude more than you would any synthetic kind of thing. So those pesticides are designed to prevent insects from damage them, fungal infections, all disease resistance and things like that. And many of our scientists have been able to capture those natural chemistries and use them to develop very low toxicity pesticides that we can use for crop protection. And like I said earlier, we've got 10,000 years of experience with organic farming, and there's nothing wrong with organic farming, but 50 years of food security in the West. And that's because of these really wonderful scientific advances that these scientists have made. And so I would love to see if we could develop some kind of dialogue that's fully transparent, to improve people's understandings about pharmaceuticals and pesticides, because I think that would really help with medical education.
No, I completely agree. I don't think I realized how much pharmacology I didn't know until I did a tox fellowship and had the opportunity to learn it again with some clinical background. But I mean, there's so much that you're expected to know in medical school. And, unfortunately, that is one of the sections that seems to be not making the cut anymore.
And that's unfortunate because it's like critical. It's one of the key features of being a doctor is prescribing medications, right? It's one of the things your license
Yeah.
does for you, right? So
You should
it's
know
really
you should know what
important.
and how it works and what the effects are of all of those medications.
Yeah.
I mean, it must have been tough. I know we talked about kind of academia and industry and these perceived biases. Was it difficult, or did you meet a lot of resistance when you first made that transition?
So everybody was stunned when I left medicine for Monsanto. They were very surprised. And, I think some people kind of thought, oh my gosh, she's gone to industry, she's sold out or whatever. But I'm still me, right? And I've mostly got a lot of support. My colleagues still talk to me and things like that. And I've had a lot of colleagues in the past 2 years start calling me and say, how'd you get your job? so I think that, I actually have a talk called how medicine became Monsanto, COVID-19, and pitfalls in scientific communication. And I think, and where I try to get, I try to have actually farmers and doctors in the same group, or not just farmers, but like big growers, companies that grow, people who are producers and things like that, but farmers as well. And I'm trying to build bridges between those two, because I think that things have gotten so politicized that it's taken away from a good narrative, right? And so farmers are usually conservative and rural, and doctors are usually sort of liberal and urban. Doctors are kind of experiencing what it's like to be a Monsanto employee right now, with the whole anti-vaccine movement building up, right? And who'd have thought that a pandemic would awaken this, big, huge increase, upsurge in the anti-vaccine group. Well, farmers and growers have been sort of facing that same kind of doubt about true scientific advances for a long time, and they don't understand. They've been like, I don't understand why nobody believes in GMOs. I don't understand why everybody thinks that pesticides are so bad. That these are really, really important innovations, and they're scientifically based. We don't understand why people object to this so much. And so now doctors are seeing that, and farmers, the rural community has a lot of doubts about these vaccinations. And so I've tried to build that bridge so people kind of come back to the middle, understand that vaccination is so important, and so is food security. So I like to say that there are 5 public health advances that we made in the 20th century that gave us a 30-year increase in life expectancy that is unprecedented, right? And so those at the turn of the 1800s to 1900s, life expectancy was 45 years, and close to half of our population farmed. A century later, 2% of our population farmed, and life expectancy was getting close to the 80s, right? How did that happen, right? Millennia that didn't happen. So five things: water sanitation, vaccination, antibiotics, food security, and vector control. Right? And I'm watching the systematic dismantling of those 5 things that actually a lot of it's unwittingly coming from the medicine world. So the Lancet published a Wakefield's article and didn't retract it for 12 years, despite overwhelming evidence of conflict of interest there. And then it turned out to be fraud, right? The whole gut microbiome, people have they have decided that, they want to reconstitute their microbiome by drinking raw water and getting rid of pasteurization. That's how you die of cholera and listeria, right? let's not do that. There's all sorts of consternation about antibiotic use. And I think that if you use antibiotics judiciously and you're careful with it, you're not going to wreck your gut microbiome. You've got to be careful, but I think that they're really, really, really important, right? Food security, once again, no, we don't understand. We in the city don't understand that groceries don't just grow on the shelves, right? It's a huge process that goes into it. And then vector control, and that's where diseases in the Middle Ages are prevented by things like synthetic chrysanthemum dust, pyrethroids, vitamin D, right? That rodenticide. So there are very, very good products out there that are really, really important. So yeah, I hope we're not stepping backwards. I hope medicine continues to evolve and starts thinking about scientific information critically and not falling for misinformation.
Yeah. Which again, the training you get doing a Tox Fellowship really helps to bridge some of those gaps and gives you the, experience and the opportunities to talk to people in medicine and, patients and farmers and have those conversations because you can relate to people on a much different level than, without that training,
Exactly.
which is really important.
Yeah, which is why it's so important for doctors to actually start thinking about industry as a possibility, because especially if it's a life science industry, because there's so many medical questions, and the scientists, like I said, they're brilliant. Most of them are PhDs and don't have a lot of answers to medical questions. And then, a lot of PhDs, there's some that are absolutely wonderful at scientific communication, but doctors are used to part of their job is to take complex scientific information and translate it to a variety of different people. Absolutely. So that's a skill set that's hard to come by. So it's I think a real opportunity for industry to, think about using more physicians to do that kind of thing.
So it sounds like you find a lot of your job very rewarding. What parts do you find the most challenging, or what, advice could you give to someone who, might be thinking about going into this? What the kind of the other side of the table?
Yeah. So it's interesting, being an ER doc, you get you get used to a lot of slings and arrows. Right. Yep. Anyone who's called a consult in the middle of the night. I had a urology fellow tell me once that all we ever called them for was Foley's. And I said, do you want us to start calling you for Foley's? Because
glad to call for everyone.
Exactly. Right. And then he got a little quiet. So I think it's actually one of the things that skills that ER gave me was to kind of be resilient, kind of be bomb-proof. You used to high stress situations, complicated issues, people being angry. That starts to become kind of like something you get used to. So I have not found there to be too many challenges that have gotten me discombobulated. And I think and that is directly because of my emergency medicine training, right? So I think, the difference between dealing with, an inebriated gangster versus somebody who's, upset that you've used chemicals, you can understand why, moms are particularly worried about this thing, and you can understand why they would be, right? There's a narrative out there, and they want to do what's right for their kids. And so if you put yourself in their shoes and start kind of asking them and some of them are very hostile at first. Put yourself in their shoes and start asking them, well, why do you think that? And let them build their story up. It's very interesting to see how fast they will start thinking critically about what they're saying. And if you show that you're engaged, that you're interested in understanding why they're scared, they will get they become interested in hearing your side of the story eventually. Now, sometimes they don't, but the vast majority of the time,
Yeah.
fine. I used to go to this conference called the Consortium of Universities for Global Health, and I was the first delegate for it from Washington University. I kind of got the ball rolling with WashU's involvement with that organization, and they are very reluctant to engage with industry. And so I used to go up to the microphone, and this is 140 medical schools from all over the world. They're deans, they're chancellors, all that kind of stuff, and they come and talk about global health issues and how to improve them. So 2,000, 3,000 people there, and I walk up to the microphone. Hi, I'm Liza from the world's most popular company, Monsanto. And I would like to talk a little bit about how important these things are, and people would be like, wow. So yeah, I don't get too nervous about stuff. I love my job. I think my job is, I feel like it's really, really fulfilling, and it's also, I think, critically important for people to understand how intrinsically associated or dependent their lives are on agriculture, and we kind of take it for granted.
Wow. I could spend all day. I know we try and keep these to about 20 to 30 minutes, but I could spend all day hearing your story. Of everything you've said today, other than the opportunity that ACMT and Bayer have for fellows to get involved in this experience to see kind of what happens on the industry side. Any other advice to fellows or recent grads or anyone who wants to get involved in this type of work?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. The way I got into it was through Dan Goldstein, and I had known Dan Goldstein as from when I was a third-year resident, and sort of pinged him and kept in touch with him all along. I mean, he helped me, gave me advice about building the fellowship, and so keep in touch with the industry folks that you meet. They're not that many, but you may find that there's an opportunity that they know about that you don't. So just sort of keep them up to speed with the steps that you've made in your career. I think that's really important. Feel free to reach out to me anytime.
I was going to say, so it sounds like now that we're all friends here, we can.
Yeah,
you can right?
Yeah, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. We can talk about different opportunities as they arise and things like that. And Bayer is a big company. We've got pharma, we've got consumer health, we've got crop science. So there's a need for physicians. So that's one. The other thing is, I think that if you can fill out your knowledge about something in the regulatory domain, learn about EPA, learn about FDA, that will give you a little bit more background that you can put on your CV that will be interesting to industry. Because that's one of the things that's where you get a lot of traction is learning about the regulatory system. And it can be dry if you're just reading it in a book, but when you're living it every day, it's actually very, very interesting. So there's that. Come to the industry section meetings at ACMT. Come to the industry section meetings this year at NACT. I haven't put one together, but yeah, and yeah, just tell people what you're interested in, and look at companies, look at innovative startups. You don't have to look for a huge company at Bayer. There are a lot of other biotech companies that are interested in hiring physicians too. So yeah, build yourself a little niche in your career. Get yourself something that's a little bit different than just acetaminophen, and have that on your resume. That write a paper. Ask an industry person. Find like a section in an industry that you're interested in. If you're interested in cosmetics, find somebody. Use your connections to find somebody who does, cosmetic toxicology, and ask them if you can write a paper with them. People write academic papers in industry all the time. So, fill out your knowledge in certain areas that are interesting to you, and then go from there.
That's great advice. Thank you so much. So, on behalf of the recent graduate section and the fellows in training section, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us today. I know you have a lot going on, so we really appreciate you sitting down to talk with us. If there are any fellows that are interested in reaching out to you about this topic, it sounds like you'll be at NAC this year, so that's great.
I will not be at NACT.
Oh,
Unfortunately, but I will be at MEMC in Malta, which is
Okay. Okay.
and then I'll be at the American Society for Tropical Medicine and Hygiene meeting, and I'll be at ACMT next year.
Okay, great. Is there an email or a good way to get in touch with you if anyone's looking to reach out?
Yes, you can use my work email. I can either post it in the chat, or you can just send it to me.
If you can just say what it is, that might, because I think
it's a long one. Ready? So Sarah Eliza, all one word, all lowercase. Sarah Eliza Dunn Halcomb, DUNNHALCOMB @Bayer.com, all lowercase.
And that's
Sarah has
there. Okay. You read my mind. Great. Well, thank you again. This completes another episode of Tox is Calling Me, the podcast that explores alternative careers in the field of medical toxicology. We would like to thank the American College of Medical Toxicology for their support, and the Medical Toxicology Fellow-in-Training and recent graduate section. And as always, thank you to our listeners for joining us today, and we will see you next time.